So without wasting much of your time, I would request Mugdha ma'am, who is the IAS Association's literary secretary, a literary enthusiast, an art lover.
Thank you so much for being with us this evening. This is our first venture, so let me formally welcome everyone. It gives me great pleasure to welcome in our midst Dr. Shashank Shah, our guest author for today's book talk on the Tata Group from Torchbearers to Trailblazers, published by Penguin Random House in December 2018, as part of a series on book conversations, and yes, our maiden venture of the literary vertical of the IAS Association in collaboration with Rajat Book Depot and Penguin Books. I would also like to extend a very warm welcome to all you lovely people in the audience who've taken out time from your busy schedules to be with us this evening for a talk which I'm absolutely sure is going to be very, very stimulating, and I'm sure it's going to then travel by word of mouth publicity and ensure that the seats which are vacant today get filled up in the next talk. A little bit about why and what is the purpose of the IAS Association doing this and similar kind of programs. As part of the IAS Association's literary vertical, it shall always be our endeavor to provide a platform to our civil servants and civil society to interact in a more informal, informative, and interesting setting such as this program. I'm very happy to inform all of you that we reached out to not just the IAS Association but to other associations as well. We sent invites to the IPS Association, the Indian Forest Service Association, the Rajasthan Administrative Service Association, the Rajasthan Account Service Association, and also to the corporate sector. And I'm really grateful to the people from CII, Young Indians, FICCI and FICCI Flow, some of whom have made it for this program. So without much ado, may I request Dr. Shashank Shah to please grace us with his presence on the stage and take it forward from here. And I'll also request Dr. Mrs. Gurjot Kaur Madam, who's the senior most civil servant present with us this evening, to kindly do us the honors of felicitating with a bouquet our author and speaker for the evening today. Ma'am, with your permission. About 45 to 50 minutes, and it'll be followed by a question and answer session open to the audience. And I'm hoping very much after the stimulating talk you will have a lot of questions to ask of the author. And just one humble request, if I could request the audience to kindly switch off their mobiles or to put it on silent mode so that we have your undivided attention for this program, please. Thank you so much, and I won't stand between you and the author now. Please take it over from here. Thank you. It's my first program, so slightly nervous about it. But let me just quickly introduce the author for those of you who've probably not read about him prior to coming to this program. So Dr. Shashank Shah is a thought leader in fields of stakeholder-centric corporate strategy, corporate responsibility, and values-based leadership with over 100 national and international publications to his credit. His research focuses on the pivotal role of corporations in economic and social value creation through visionary leadership, stakeholder-centric decision-making, and inclusive business strategies. He has been a visiting scholar at the Harvard Business School, fellow and project director at Harvard University South Asia Institute, visiting scholar at Copenhagen Business School, editor-in-chief of Harvard University Postdoctoral Editors Association, and consulting editor at the Business India Group. A recipient of the President of India and Governor's Gold Medals for excellence in MBA and MPhil programs at the Sri Satya Sai Institute of Higher Learning, and of the AIMS International Outstanding Doctoral Management Student Award at the IIM Ahmedabad. His highly acclaimed books, Win-Win Corporations and the Tata Group, were published in 2016 and 2018 respectively, both by Penguin Random House. And only yesterday, he has delivered a TED Talk at BITS Pilani, Junjunu. So we once again thank you, sir, and welcome you for your talk now.
Thank you, Mugdha, for that wonderful introduction. Thanks to the Rajasthan IAS Association, Rajat Bookstore, and Penguin for organizing this evening. It's very encouraging for millennial business authors to get this kind of reception, to share their thoughts and the endeavor that they've made in order to bring out a book. I'd like to give some background to my research work before I delve more into the book, what are its key learnings, and what are the fascinating stories about the Tata Group, which needs no introduction. This book is an outcome of a decade-long research that I have done. I've interviewed about 100 senior Tata leaders, referred to about 1,500 research papers, case studies, national and international publications, magazines, etc. Visited their archives and factory locations across India. And it is an outcome of that independent research I have done in order to study India's largest and most globalized conglomerate. This is my third book, and as Mugdha mentioned, the first book was Soulful Corporations, second Win-Win Corporations, and the third one is on the Tata Group. All three focusing on how businesses can play a very important role in the socio-economic development of India, while also creating a lot of wealth for themselves and for their stakeholders. So let me begin with a broad overview of where we stand today. It's the season of the Jaipur Lit Fest. It's also the season of the World Economic Forum at Davos. And among the latest findings of the World Economic Forum is that by 2030, earlier the date given was 2035, but now they say by 2030, 80% of India will be the middle class. We'll have 100 crore middle class people in India, and the per capita income will be going up from $1,500 to $7,500. That's the kind of growth in capacity to purchase, the ambition and the size that's going to be happening in India in the next 16 years. India is also going to become the world's most populous country in the next 3 years. And we'll have 60% of India above the age of 25. So we have such a fascinating market ahead of us, and such a fascinating success story of a country which for 700 years was under some form of colonization. Over the last 70 years since independence, the first 45 years were experiments in different forms of governance. We were quite public sector centric, and a lot of licensing, regulation, taxation system, which I'm going to dwell in greater detail. And in the last 25 years, post-liberalization, India has risen to become the third largest economy in the world in terms of purchasing power parity after US and China. Imagine a country which was under the British rule 70 years ago. And it was Arnold Toynbee, the famous British historian, who said that in the 21st century, India will conquer her conquerors. And now as we are in the 21st century, in 2019, the economic figures say that India will outpace and outperform Great Britain as the world's fifth largest economy in this year. So we've seen a fascinating story of this country, and we've also seen it unfold in front of our eyes. And when the story of India comes up, the story of the Tata Group cannot be left behind, because Tatas and India are quite intertwined in their trajectory. For the benefit of those who know the Tatas but do not know what the Tatas are all about as a business organization, they are among India's most largest and most globalized Indian business, most globalized Indian conglomerate. A little bit about why the Tatas are unique, or what prompted me to write about the Tatas. That is because of their model of business, the structure of business that they have. Very often it is believed that the Tatas are not the most wealthy or most wealth-creating business organization in India. That's incorrect. Mr. Ratan Tata may not be the wealthiest businessman in India, and I'll tell you why. The Tata structure is as follows. There are 100 Tata companies, out of which 29 are publicly held and 71 are privately held. Of these 29, we have eminent names like TCS, Tata Steel, Tata Motors, Tata Communications, Tata Chemicals, Titan, Voltas, Rallis, Taj Hotel, the Rambagh Palace is here. All of these are Tata companies with 30 to 70% ownership by Tata Sons, which is the holding company. Tata Sons, in turn, is owned 67% by the Tata Trusts. 0.8% of Tata Sons is owned by Mr. Ratan Tata, 0.8%. 67% is held by Tata Trusts, which are public charitable trusts. And as per the government's mandate, public charitable trusts have to spend 85% of their earnings for social welfare and charity. So now you have a model in front of you. 30 to 70% of the profits of Tata companies as dividends go to Tata Sons, and 67% of Tata Sons dividends go to Tata Trusts, and 85% of that money is spent for society, charity and philanthropy. And this is a virtuous cycle which has been in position since 100 years. And this is a virtuous cycle in perpetuity because this is a legally mandated system by those who have bequeathed the Tata Trusts with this kind of wealth. So you know forever and more, the kind of profits that the Tatas make will get converted into the quantum of money that will get back to society. As of now, the Tata Trusts and the Tata companies through CSR spend 2,000 crores every year for charity and social welfare. As Tatas make more money, as India grows fivefold, this amount will grow fivefold. So you have a virtuous model here which distinguishes it, and in my research I haven't come across an equivalent model in India where business is for creating wealth and sharing it for society. By and large, businesses are used as avenues to bequeath wealth to the next generation. This makes Tatas very unique, and as the late J.R.D. Tata, the only businessman to win the Bharat Ratna, had said, Tatas are a national institution. Unlike other business houses which make money and establish more businesses for bequeathing it for the next generation, and you see similar business houses having divided companies to their subsequent generations, the Tatas will remain an institution for India because that's what its structure mandates. Having said that, let me take you through the introduction of the Tata Group. Snapshot, and I'm not going to read what's mentioned in the slides. This is just for you to get an additional knowledge to what I'm already sharing here. Let's go back to the 19th century. How many business houses complete 150 years? We may not even remember 2 or 3 names, but the names of the Tatas definitely comes because they've just celebrated their 150th year. Another business family from the 19th century was Premchand Roychand family. Jamsetji Tata had incidentally worked at Premchand Roychand before he started his own independent venture. The 4th generation of Premchand Roychand still exists. They, in 2014, earned a revenue or had sales of 83 crore rupees. In the same year, the Tatas had a revenue or sales of 6,50,000 crore rupees. So you have 2 business houses of the same time period, one run by subsequent generations of the family, one run by trusts, and the subsequent generations of the family are trustees of the business house. And you see the kind of growth and difference in terms of the volume and the scale at which the Tatas have worked. So it can undeniably be said that the Tatas have achieved not only the dream of India's industrialization, but also the dream of India's globalization. Today, the Tata Group is the largest employer in Britain, with Tetley, Chorus and Jaguar Land Rover being owned by the Tatas. So imagine one of the largest employers or the largest employers in Great Britain is an Indian business house. That's how the Tatas make India proud. I'd like to quote Professor Grass of the Harvard Business School, who was the founder of the academic discipline of business history. And in 1949, he had this to say, and I'll quote, Tatas have done much to introduce industrial capitalism in India in place of the old mercantile and petty capitalism. As the companies progressed, they socialized the business by transferring much of the ownership to charitable trusts. And we in our time have thought that we, America, were the original contributors in some of this socialization from within. In 1949, Professor Grass observed that not America but India has been pioneer in socializing business while contributing to industrialization. This is quite a compliment to India and its way of business. Thank you. Now let's go back in time. 15 decades is what the Tatas have been in existence. But the story of the Tatas starts 13 centuries ago, when the first group of refugees fled Persia due to the Islamic invasion and came to the shores of Gujarat. And we have the famous story of the Raja of Gujarat, who tells the Dastur, or the head of the Parsi community, that Gujarat is full, we don't have place. He sends a bowl of milk, indicating that we are full, there's no place. And the Dastur, who is the chief priest, puts sugar in that milk and says that as this milk becomes sweet because of the sugar, we, the Persians, the Parsi community, will mix with your community in Gujarat and make it sweeter and better. That's been the story of the Tatas for the last 13 centuries. And to this group of Parsi refugees belongs Jamsetji Nasarwanji Tata. Nasarwanji, Jamsetji's father, was the 15th generation of Zoroastrian priests, but the first who moved out of priestly duties to be a part of trade and commerce. Jamsetji was also trained as a priest, but he brought the priestly values to his business. And he brought them through these key watchwords: Humta, Hukta, and Huvrashtra. You see there at the base of this crest. This was put on the entrance of the Esplanade House, which still stands at the South Mumbai, which was Jamsetji's own home. What do these words mean? In Persian, they mean good thoughts, good words, good deeds. These have been the watchwords of the Tata Way of Business for the last 150 years. In 1868, the Tatas began their business, and Jamsetji was like a startup king of his era. Textiles, shipping, transportation, silk rearing, hospitality, steel, power, and higher education. In that time period, he lived a short life of 64 years, but spent 15 years on sea because he went to the eastern and western hemispheres in order to find out the best practices. You can imagine spending 15 years on the ocean when there was no other means of transport, so that he could get best of both the worlds for India's growth, and established all of this in his lifetime, just of 64 years. But there are 2 or 3 learnings which we must dwell on. Very few people know that the Empress Mills, which was the flagship company of the Tatas, Jamsetji wanted to ensure that a fixed proportion of the profits of Empress Mills should be given to the establishment of the Indian Institute of Science. The shareholders declined because they thought this was absurd. Why should companies give part of their profit for a social welfare project? But 100 years later, the Government of India has passed the Indian Companies Act 2013 and has mandated that 2% of profits of successful companies should be spent for social welfare. So we see Jamsetji Tata was 100 years ahead of his time to envisage how corporations can contribute a part of their success for social welfare. Another story is that of the Esplanade House, which was a palatial home. It was the first residential house in Mumbai to get its own energy, electricity. But Jamsetji wasn't happy with that. He wanted that the entire city of Mumbai should have energy, but not just ordinary energy, clean energy, because he thought the textile mills are polluting the environment of Mumbai. So he envisaged the hydroelectric project in 1875. 7 years before the first hydroelectric project actually saw the light of day in Wisconsin in USA. Unfortunately, the Tata Power Company came into existence in 1910 because they took such a long time to get government permissions and a lot of inhibition by the British Raj to give an Indian house an opportunity to construct power plants on the Western Ghats. But when it did, it became the first company to start providing hydroelectric energy, which was clean energy. The term which again became popular recently, 100 years ahead of his time, Jamsetji Tata had envisaged clean energy and no pollution for Mumbai. when pollution was not even a matter of concern, India was still grappling with its colonizers. This is a very well-known institution. Can anybody take a guess what it is? Of course, I've written there. I shouldn't have and then made it a quiz question. This is the Indian Institute of Science. It is among the highest ranked institutions in India in the top rankings of Asia and the world. Very few people know that Jamshedji Tata contributed 50% of his wealth for establishment of the Indian Institute of Science, and only 50% for his two sons, Dorabji and Sir Ratan Tata. And you may not know, and there's a lesser known fact, that the Indian Institute of Science didn't see the light of day in his time, because Lord Curzon was not convinced that India needed higher education. Who will employ the scientists stepping out of the Institute of Science in India? So he did not give permission. Almost a decade after Jamshedji's demise, IAS came into being. But he did not give up his dream. In his will, he mentioned that whenever the government gives permission, 50% of my wealth should be given to the Indian Institute of Science. And he made it he made it very clear that it should be called Indian Institute of Science, not Tata Institute of Science. Because I don't want people to think that I have left behind an institution so that people remember me. I want the people of this country to feel proud of an institution which belongs to them, and hence the Indian Institute of Science. And what is more important is, today the word strategic philanthropy is very popular in the corporate circles. We have people from FICCI and ASSOCHAM and other corporate organizations. Today's strategic philanthropy talks about what strategic benefits will the donor get out of his donation or his charity. Jamshedji Tata's strategic philanthropy was, what benefits will India and its people get from my charity? That's a great lesson, a century ahead of its time, which we are benefiting today. 2,000 young scientists step out of the Indian Institute of Science every single year in order to fulfill Jamshedji's dream, not knowing the far-sightedness this man had about India. Let's come to the current times. The Tatas are most often known for their social contribution. Indian Institute of Science, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, Tata Institute of Social Science, Tata Memorial Hospital, the most state-of-the-art and the largest cancer treatment hospital in Asia. All of these are gifts of Tata to the world. But very few people know that Tatas have also been the most successful conglomerate by wealth creation as well. As part of my book, I did a small analysis, and I found out that Tatas, if a notional amount of 1 lakh rupees was invested in 16 Tata companies equally after liberalization, 92 to 2017-18, the BSE companies gave a return of 10 lakh rupees on that 1 lakh investment. The Tata companies, the 16 companies equally divided, gave returns of 40 lakhs, 4 times the BSE output. Even more fascinating, the Tatas have created more wealth for their shareholders in the last 10 years than the Reliance Group or the Aditya Birla Group. They have created more wealth for their shareholders than Siemens, Mitsubishi, and GE, the largest conglomerates of Japan, Europe, and America. And they have also created more wealth for their shareholders than Berkshire Hathaway, which is headed by the phenomenal investor Warren Buffett. So you have here a model that you can do well by doing good, and that a virtuous creation of wealth can also lead to a lot of returns to the shareholders who have invested in these businesses. Interestingly, Tatas have 40 lakh shareholders, 7 lakh employees, the second largest employer in India after the Defense Forces and Indian Railways. This will interest the IAS officers here, that the Tatas are the third largest employer in India. And every alternate Indian consumes a Tata product every day. You've heard the jingle, Namak ho Tata ka Tata Namak. It was started in 1984 when Srimati Indira Gandhi reached out to JRD Tata to support the iodization of salt movement, and Tata Salt became a household name. Titan, Voltas, steel, communication, gold, watches, every aspect, perfumes and Lakme for long years was Indian women's pride. And that was started when Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru reached out to the Tatas when they banned imported products. I believe the wives of all the IAS officers in Delhi get out the Prime Minister's car, and this is a documented fact, it's not a fable. They get out the Prime Minister's car when he was going to the External Affairs Ministry, and Pandit Nehru was wondering what's this all about. Then he was told that the wives of the IAS officers are very unhappy because the government of India has banned the import of cosmetics, and Delhi women cannot not have access to cosmetics, so please do something. Then they went to the Prime Minister's residence and reached out to Srimati Indira Gandhi, who was the host of Pandit Nehru, because Mrs. Nehru had passed away. She was staying at the Prime Minister's house, and besieged her that please do something. And that's when the Tatas were approached that why don't you start a cosmetics brand? And they named it Lakme, resonating with the word Lakshmi, and also resonating with the word Lakme, which was a very famous brand in Paris. It was a music brand, I believe. So there is everything of the Tatas that we've used at some point in time in our lives. I already shared how much of wealth they've created. A very important point which I need to highlight here. Very often millennials like me think that the left of right philosophy, where we talk about rights and equality and anti-capitalism, etc., is the way to go, and that capitalism is an evil and profit making is a bad thing. I'd like to highlight that capitalism, as envisaged by Adam Smith, who is considered the father of modern economics, a Scottish moral philosopher from the 18th century. He wrote the theory of moral sentiments in 1759, followed by his book, The Wealth of Nations, in 1777. We've only followed the Wealth of Nations, but have ignored the theory of moral sentiments. His basic premise was that ethics and economics should coalesce, and economic principles should be subservient to good life of society. The same was resonated by Chanakya 3,000 years ago. The same was mentioned by Socrates in Greece about 1,500 years ago. So this is a philosophy which is time tested, and this is a philosophy which we see today succeeding if businesses are done the right way. Very few people may know that the Tatas contribute to 4% of India's GDP and 2.25% of India's taxes. Last year alone, the Tatas paid 47,000 crores as tax. 47,000 crores. I believe the budget of the Ministry of Textiles of the Government of India is 3,500 crores. 47,000 crores is the tax by Tatas, which is equivalent to the entire tax collected by a large state like Andhra Pradesh. So if businesses are done the right way, if the tax system is transparent and process-oriented like we are working towards today, GST and other things which are very process-oriented, painful to start with, but desirable so that there is as much transparency in the whole process, the whole virtuosity of capitalism will then pass on to the benefits of the society. Because very often, many students I interact with, they say, but this is not happening, that is not happening, corporations are evil. I said the corporations contribute tax, you and I contribute tax. It is that money which the government uses to give us education, health, infrastructure, etc., etc. If tax is not collected properly, that kind of money is not going to be available. If that kind of money is not available, we are not going to be the affluent and developed country that we want to. Unless we want the Chinese model, where the government decides what will come as the headlines in the next day's newspaper, or the government decides who will produce what and which company should manufacture what quantity of products. Incidentally, India was in that stage. I remember a very famous argument which Mr. Rahul Bajaj placed before the government. He was penalized in one particular year, and you know the reason for getting penalized is because the Bajaj Motors had manufactured more more vehicles than they were permitted to. So he was penalized for his efficiency. So he filed a suit in the court saying that, how can you penalize me for my efficiency? I have not exceeded my limit. Within the kind of money that I have produced more. The government should acknowledge my performance that I have been more efficient. Instead, the government is penalizing me for being more efficient. We were in that stage at some point in time. I'm glad India has moved ahead. And that's the kind of virtuous wealth creation that can happen. Let me cover some stories now. What enables Tatas to be successful? There are 5 core values of the Tatas. This here is, for those who don't know, the brand. Tata is the most valued brand in India. The brand value, $15,500 million. Far, far ahead than all other 4 competitors who ranked 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. SBI, LIC, Airtel and Reliance. That's the kind of brand value they enjoy in today's society in India. The 5 values of the Tatas. First is integrity. It's one thing to talk about these things. It's other things to live it in action. And I have tried to capture. By the way, let me just have a caveat here. The book is not a hagiographical account of the Tatas. I'm sharing all the good things here, but there are certain limitations, certain failures, which the leaders themselves have accepted. And what are the learnings from that for common man, for youth, for entrepreneurs, for managers? I've highlighted that as well. And any good management book, in my opinion, should highlight both aspects of the story, but not with the objective of criticizing the protagonist, but with the objective of sharing the key learnings so that the reader who is investing a precious 100 hours in reading a book goes back not as a cynic of the protagonist or as an admirer of the protagonist, but as a knowledgeable man of how management, leadership, business, innovation, excellence, globalization, customer centricity, people practices, sustainable development, etc. can be implemented. I guess that's the core objective of good business books. Integrity. They say we will be fair, honest, transparent and ethical in our conduct. Everything we do must stand the test of public scrutiny. Let me go back to the year 1922. I'll be sharing several historical stories as well. This was the time after World War I. The Tatas helped the British Raj by providing products which were required in the First World War. And they took a cut for that because they were not profit-making products, but products that defended the Allied forces in the World War I. The British government gave an antithetical treatment to the Tatas by opening up the markets after the World War I. And an outcome of that was that there was steel dumping from other Asian countries like Japan and European countries like Germany. So while recovering from the kind of over-efficiencies of the World War I, Tatas had to really face tough times. And Tata Steel was in the red, means they were making losses. Someone suggested, why don't we sell Tata Steel? So R.D. Tata, the father of GRD, he thundered, he said, over my dead body, I'm not going to sell Tata Steel, it's the pride of the Tatas. Today's times when companies are in red, what do famous or infamous businessmen do? They get the visa of a foreign country a couple of quarters in advance and make their way out. You know whom I'm referring to. There are several today in headlines, the likes of Vijay Mallya or Nirav Modi. And I'm not revealing, this is already there all over. I'm contrasting that with what Dorabji Tata did. He mortgaged his entire estate, his wife's jewelry and her prized possession, the Jubilee diamond, which is twice the size of the Kohinoor. So Kohinoor was not the largest diamond. Jubilee diamond, which the Tata family owned, was twice the size of Kohinoor. He mortgaged that with the Imperial Bank, which is now the State Bank of India, to get 1 crore rupees loan so that he could pay salaries to his employees and keep Tata Steel afloat. This is an example of how family-owned businesses can lead the way through their practices. They just didn't do that. Tata Steel turned around. But this became an example with subsequent situations. Tatas followed suit. And I'll quote another example before, okay, so let me finish that and then I'll give you a management lesson from that. This was in the year 2001, the Tata Finance story. The managing director or the CEO of Tata Finance had indulged in some speculative trading. His name was Dilip Pendse, which was illegal. Over a couple of quarters, the senior leadership in the Tata Group came to know of it. They went straight to the RBI. The company is going to RBI to complain of its own company. Otherwise, what we'll see, shoving under the carpet of all the stories we have to hide when we have made a mistake. The Tata leadership went to RBI, they filed a police complaint themselves, and they went to CBI to say that my company has made a mistake, please take action. Dilip Pendse was put behind bars, there was long litigation, and a long story short, I'll come to the management side of it, and you may want to read it in detail. I've covered it briefly in the book also. Tata Finance was one of the Tata companies, and it was not fully owned by the Tata sons. So they could have said it's a separate legal entity, we go for liquidation, we don't have any responsibility. That's what you can do by law. They had deposits of over 2,700 crores, of which about 800 crores were by 4 lakh small depositors. And that's the money which people usually ignore. That's what happened in the 2008 financial crisis. The retail depositors, the small-time depositors were the biggest losers. Tata's reached out, called a meeting, reached out and said, your deposits are maturing after a couple of years. But even today, if you all feel that Tatas may not exist after 2 years, you can withdraw your money today. They kept a helicopter to ensure that any kind of emergency, in order to reach out to all the disbursal centers, there is no delay. And Tata Sons kept aside 600 crores to ensure that Tata Finance does not go in the red in its brand and reputation, though it has gone in red in its legality. They shut down the company. 5 years later, they started Tata Capital, which today is one of the successful finance companies. Company after company, we see examples of how Tata Sons and the Tata leadership have taken the lead in order to protect the interests of the minority community in the business sense, the employees, the small-time depositors, the customers, and most often the society. Very often companies' approach or the corporate approach is, I will succeed at your cost. The Tatas are often blamed that everybody else succeeds at their cost, and I'll share some other examples on that. But it is possible to do well by doing good, because time and again there are examples that to stand in the eyes of public scrutiny is far more important than earning profits, because that will give you long-lasting wealth. Short-termism will give you profits, but if we see why Tatas are head and shoulders above in their brand perception, and why so many of you have gathered here to hear about the Tatas, and most of you said, oh, we came because it's about the Tatas and we wanted to know more about them. That good name, in Sanskrit there is word Satkirti, good name, is the most difficult to get, and that comes when you stand core to your principles again and again. And if you make mistakes, correct them. Don't hide them. I guess for millennials, young entrepreneurs, that's the greatest lesson. गलती कीजिए, हो जाती है, इंसान है, लेकिन उस गलती को सुधारने का प्रयत्न भी कीजिए, और वो गलती सुधारने के बाद वो गलती मत दोहराइए. That's the least we can learn from such situations. Another example, this is about TCS. TCS is India's most valued company, $100 billion of market cap. But very few people know that TCS could have introduced its IPO or could have gone to the stock markets at the peak of the IT boom in the Silicon Valley, when TCS had a market valuation of 97,000 crores. Credit Suisse gave a market valuation of TCS of 97,000 crores and insisted and pleaded almost that TCS should go public. It was a privately held company. Tata Sons held it fully. The vice chairman of Tata Sons reached out to Ratan Tata and said, we are getting outstanding valuation. Most of the leading Tata companies' market cap was about 20,000 crores. Even if we liquidate a part of the market cap we get from TCS, we'll be able to take over all the Tata companies as 100% owned by the Tatas, and we'll clear all our debts. Let's go ahead and go for the IPO of TCS. Ratan Tata, and this is his then executive assistant has himself told me, because he was first-hand witness to this. Ratan Tata said, yes, I agree that we are getting an outstanding valuation. But we all know that this boom is artificially created. Today, they have fantastic valuations for IT stocks. Tomorrow, these will collapse. The price at which the shareholders would have got their shares will not be up to the mark to the dividends that they will get in those years. And they will hold that against us. I don't want any shareholder who has invested in a Tata company to feel that the Tatas did not think about them, but thought about themselves. So we will not go for the IPO of TCS in this boom period. They went for the IPO 3-4 years later when the market was more realistic, and the TCS IPO was subscribed 7.7 times more than what it was listed, and the rest is history. Integrity, and nobody knows this. I know because I'm doing research and I'm sharing this story in public. They didn't do this so that people will say, "Arey wah, what a great thing." Integrity, and I remember in his letters, Pandit Nehru had written to Srimati Indira Gandhi, and this is taught in colleges very often. What is integrity? What is honesty? What is transparency? It is what you are when you are doing what you would do when nobody is watching you. True honesty, true integrity is that what you are when you're doing that when nobody is watching you. And if we reflect on ourselves, how we behave, we'll know really whether we live up to the standards of integrity. Globalization. The Tatas are 67% globalized, or rather 67% of Tata's earnings come from international markets. Several people had asked the Tatas, why are Tatas going overseas when India is attracting fantastic FDI? This was a conversation between Ratan Tata and one of my professors at Harvard. And he said, yes, I agree that the world is coming to India, but my reason for going overseas is the follows. If India grows at 10%, the kind of businesses that Tatas can enter into is going to be only 6%. Because 4% of businesses are such where we will have to compromise our values, and Tatas are not going to be able to enter those kinds of businesses. So in order to grow at par with the rate of growth of India and even better, I have to look parallelly for success stories and greener pastures overseas. So even in order to be able to be successful, we do not need to cut corners, but we can look at opportunities elsewhere so that we can grow successfully, keeping our core values and our code of conduct intact. Let's go to the next point, or the next core value, excellence. We will be passionate about achieving the highest standards of quality, always promoting meritocracy. This is a story of Tata Motors. Sumant Mulgaonkar was a chairman, very eminent automobile engineer. Incidentally, the Tata Motors did not get an opportunity. They were ready for a collaboration. Mercedes had reached out to the Tata Motors in 1950s for a collaboration. And the Tatas had given the keys to the Tata Mercedes manufactured car to the Commerce Secretary of the Government of India, saying, please use these cars for 1 year. 6 cars they gave. If you like the quality, please give us permission to manufacture cars in India. It is recorded that the Commerce Secretary and Mr. Krishna Menon, who was then a very eminent civil servant in the Indian government, used those cars, appreciated them for 1 year, but returned the keys back without any permission to manufacture cars in India. 30 years later, again, there was a collaboration possible with the Honda. Again, the government, then it was, I think, the Rajiv Gandhi government, for some legal reason did not give permission. But when Maruti came into existence, Srimati Gandhi invited Mr. Sumant Mulgaonkar, who was the head of Tata Motors, to be chairman of Maruti, so that the Tata's expertise can be used in the success story, which was in the making, which is Maruti. I'm sharing these stories because it's an audience of business and bureaucrats, so both sides of the audience can enjoy, and business and bureaucracy are always the two ends of the spectrum, but there's always synergies which can be exploited, and there are always lessons which each side can learn from the others. And today India has matured where the synergies are more predominant than the antagonism, and that's something we need to be proud of. So in the 1980s, Tata trucks were most popular. In fact, people had to wait for 10 years to get a Tata truck. Not because the Tatas could not manufacture more trucks, but the government has said that the Tatas can manufacture only 5,000 trucks a year. Even if they want to manufacture more, they cannot manufacture, even though there is a 10-year waiting. We do not want you to manufacture more trucks. I mean, the millennials should know why India did not succeed, because it's not that we didn't have the capacity, but we were experimenting with a form of economic development which did not succeed even in the star performer of the USSR, on which our economy was kind of modeled. When the USSR collapsed, we realized that this is not a model which will sustain itself. At that time, trucks had what was called the non-synchronous gearbox. It was very difficult to change the gear. Suman Mulgaonkar wanted to introduce synchronous gearboxes, but they were not made in India. They had to be imported. So his senior committee said, no sir, we don't want to import. The customer is not going to pay for synchronous gearboxes. We will have to bear the cost. We don't want to do that. The final word is always with the boss, whether it's business or bureaucracy. So Suman Mulgaonkar chaired that committee and said, how many of you have driven a truck for 3 days? Nobody raised their hands. Okay, 1 day, have you driven a truck for 1 day? They said, no, sir. You should drive a truck for 1 day to know why I want to introduce synchronous gearboxes, because that truck driver is driving that truck 365 days a year, 12 hours a day, on the rugged roads and the ghats, on the highways and the inner ways. And I want to make his experience of driving a Tata truck far more enjoyable. He may not pay me the additional expense I indulge in, but customer affection is what we should focus on. Today, the word customer affection has come into the management jargon. 40 years earlier, Suman Mulgaonkar was talking about customer affection. There was also a time when Tata's trucks were in short supply. In 1970s, the Tata trucks were in short supply, and there was a 40,000 premium in the market. So again, Suman Mulgaonkar's colleague said that let's raise the prices, because we are not getting permission to manufacture more trucks. At least let's raise the prices. And Mulgaonkar said, profits should come from productivity and not by raising prices in a favorable market. It's a vision statement for modern management thinkers. Profits should come from productivity, not by raising prices in a favorable market. It takes a lot of statesmanship to think like this and yet be successful financially and in the eyes of the customer. I guess these are the lessons in customer development, product development, pricing development, the core objectives of business. We've all grown up studying great thinkers, Michael Porter, Philip Kotler, all the Western thinkers. But I believe India has come of age where we need to study Indian businesses and see that in this culture and in this cultural milieu, how businesses can be successfully done. At least as a business author, that has been my endeavor. And all my 3 books have focused on the Indian way of business and how successful strategies can be drafted. Here is a fascinating example. TCS, they contribute 2/3 of the profits of the Tatas at this point in time, the IT boom. I have 15 more minutes. I'll cover the other things, but there's some very nice stories. On one particular December, there was a team of TCS managers at the office of Thermo King Corporation in Minneapolis in USA. The customer, as is the case in any IT business, wanted some more things to be done, but did not have the budget for that. That additional thing which the customer wanted was costing 1 crore rupees. So this business account manager called his colleagues at home and said the customer wants a little bit more of this, but they don't have the budget. Can we work overtime and do it for the customer? It will be a nice token of appreciation. So they all agreed, and on eve of Christmas, they gave this additional benefit to the customer, which costed 1 crore rupees. They said, this is your Christmas gift. The customer was amazed. Christmas gift of $3 lakh. Not, they had never heard of it. Christmas, so they approached their legal department because they will get into some tax problem. How can you accept a $3 lakh Christmas gift? It's a bribe, it cannot be a gift. Because a gift can be $1,000, $2,000. It was an unprecedented gesture and they gave a token amount in order to accept that. But here is an example of how customer centricity can be practiced at the lowest levels. They never approached their seniors in Mumbai. They never approached the CEO to ask him what they should do. They worked overtime in the holiday season so that the customer is delighted. I guess this happens when the culture of customer centricity percolates. The real joy of any leader is when people at the lowest rungs of leadership are as focused as those at the top. The Prime Minister or Chief Minister may have a brilliant vision, but his cabinet, the bureaucracy, and the person at the desk delivering to the common citizen, if he or she shares the same vision, that's when the success of the leadership is truly manifest. And here's an example of how that happens. Here are the TCH profits, and you see they are head and shoulders above their competitors. Let me go to the next core value, unity. We will invest in our people and partners, enable continuous learning, and build caring and collaborative relationships based on trust and mutual respect. I go back to the year 1975. Sunil Chainani was a TAS officer, a very eminent environmentalist, a part of the Bombay Environmental Action Group, which was opposing the construction of a bridge from the Panvel Island to the Bombay mainland. JRD Tata was the head of the committee which was wanting that bridge to be constructed. Here Sunil Chainani, an employee of Tata's, was giving interviews and speaking in the public domain that this bridge should not be constructed when his super boss was in charge of that committee. How many of us would do that? JRD called Sunil and he called him to meet him. Sunil wrote his resignation letter and went to JRD Tata and said, I want to resign, sir. JRD asked him, why are you doing this? He said, no, sir, I do not like to explain myself. I want to resign. So he went on the other side, tore his resignation letter and said, I want people of your passion to be in my company. I have not called you here to seek your resignation, only to have a conversation with you. Sunil is no more. In 2011, he passed away. When he died, Guardian newspaper reported, Chainani worked briefly for the multinational group Tata, and astonishingly, much of his work thereafter was financed by the company, even when he was apparently acting against the company's interests. How many companies which support causes which are diametrically opposite to its own profit-making objectives? In the late 1950s, while addressing a batch of TAS officers, JRD Tata had mentioned, most business houses demand loyalty to the founding family and the owners. In Tata's, I believe loyalty is not to any family or a person, but to a cause and ideal. Identify your cause and work towards it. This is what unity stands for. Caring for your employees stands for. In 1980s, JRD Tata completed his 50 years as the chairman of the Taj Group of hotels. That was also a time when two people at Taj Mumbai was caught for theft. They were caught for theft. And all the processes were followed. They had appealed to the chairman. After the felicitation, JRD came and supervised this particular action committee meeting. He listened to all of them and found that they were at fault. Told the manager in charge, please relieve them because their charges of theft are proven. Then he called the manager aside and said, please find out if these two employees have school-going children. If they have school-going children, Tata should take the responsibility of their education. I don't want the young children to pay the price for their father's follies. How many of us think beyond the obvious? A leader is a statesman first and a businessman afterwards. And I think that's the reason why JRD Tata deserved the Bharat Ratna that he was conferred. He was not an infallible human being. I'm sure each one of us have our limitations. But in our best and most difficult moments, the kind of decisions that we take is what defines what our leadership truly stands for. I call this form of leadership, love thy labor. As Jesus Christ had said, love thy neighbor. This is love thy labor. Let's first love our labor who are working for us. Then we may be able to love our neighbor who has nothing to do with us. Another example is of Tata Steel. This is an era of mass layoffs. The Tata Steel had become a behemoth and not able to be profitable. They decided that they had to cut down on employees. There were like 85,000 employees in Tata Steel. They devised a unique early separation scheme. What was the scheme? Those who volunteered, of course, they identified who would be laid off. Over 10 years, 40,000 people were laid off. The separation scheme was, and this is interesting for government organizations because public sector organizations always struggle with layoffs. You can lay off people if you have such attractive schemes. The attractive scheme was that whoever is laid off, till his or her notional date of retirement, you get between 1.2 to 1.5 times of your salary. You and your entire family gets healthcare benefits. If you are in Jamshedpur, free healthcare. If you are outside, you get an insurance policy, lifetime. And for 3 years, you can still use your house, though you are not working for the Tata Steel, and find an alternate house. And even though you are claiming that salary till the notional date of retirement from us, you can also take up another job and earn dual source of income. The industry people told Dr. J.J. Irani, who was the managing director of Tata Steel, Jamshed, and he told me this, we had an hour-and-a-half long interview, he said, Jamshed, you have either a lot of too much money or too little brains. Who gives a separation scheme of this kind? You think Tata Steel will ever be able to come out of the kind of expenditure that you are incurring? It was an experiment. They did not know whether they will, though they had calculated that over 15 to 20 years, this will definitely help them. The Fortune magazine called this decision of Tata Steel as among the top 10 best industrial decisions ever in the world and placed them at par with Apple, Microsoft, Google and several other landmark companies which had revolutionized their industries. The reason being, you were successfully able to lay off 40,000 labor force without any strife. That too in Bihar and Jharkhand, where the slightest provocation people are ready to go on strike. Today, or this decade, Tata celebrate 90 years of industrial harmony. How many companies can boast of 90 years of industrial harmony? There may have been ups and downs, but these are the examples which prove that you can make a difference. Fourth point, responsibility. I already covered how the Tata model gives 85% of the Tata Trust money for charity. Another thing which I observed among the senior leadership of the Tata Group was that all of them held this notion that when ultimately the money that we are earning is going to be for the benefit of the society or our stakeholders, why should we do things which harm them while that money is being made or in the process of our business? It is like doing all the sins imaginable and then going to Tirupati and shaving your head thinking that, oh, we have eased ourselves of the guilt because we offered our hair to Lord Venkateshwara. God doesn't need your dirty hair. He has his own beautiful hair. Going and giving hair in Tirupati as per the Hindu belief is giving your negative qualities, not your hair. But we think that we can do all the bad and then God is most merciful, so He will forgive us. So we think that we can do business any way we want and then do some charity and ease ourselves of the guilt that, arey, we are doing so much charity. Most of these leaders believed that the means to doing the business and the ends of doing the business is the same because it doesn't make sense if we are harming the environment and the people and the employees and the society and the customers while making money and then afterwards giving that money back to them saying, oh, we are doing all this for you and for your benefit. That is a fundamental aspect of corporate responsibility. It's not the amount of money we give as that 2%. It's also the way we do our business, because that is far more important than the quantum of charity that is given. I guess going forward, that will be the vision for India and India Inc. A small example, 1999, the Kargil War was just over. Prime Minister Vajpayee successfully led India to victory in the Kargil War. And there were opportunities to contribute to the Prime Minister's Relief Fund. So Mr. Gopal Krishnan, who was one of the directors in Tata Sons, he was a career leader at Hindustan Unilever, just joined Tata's after his retirement as a director in Tata Sons. He went and told Ratan Tata, why don't you go and contribute some money to the relief fund? There's a great opportunity of a photo op with the Prime Minister. So Ratan Tata said, what's the big deal in getting a photograph with the Prime Minister? Our focus at Tata's is to ensure that the money that we are giving should reach the last man in the line. Gopal Krishnan came back thinking, this is a different company because we didn't do that earlier in other companies. Over the next 6 months, 3 board members of Tata's and 1 representative each from Army, Navy and Air Force discussed and confabulated on what is the best way to help the Kargil martyrs and put together a defense welfare fund of 12 crore rupees, the corpus of which can be continuously used for the benefit of martyrs not only from the Kargil war but any subsequent defense adventures that may occur at the borders because of our enemy states. Similar thing happened in the Taj, the 26/11 attack. My next door neighbors, husband and wife, passed away in that attack at the Oberoi Hotel in Mumbai. Their 2 young daughters, then aged 6 and 8. Tata's decided, because there were a lot of people in the hospital who didn't have anybody to pay for them. People who died at the Victoria Terminus station, people who died on the road because of the terrorist attack, which was from the Pakistan side. Ratan Tata said, all those who have died at the Taj and all those who have died anywhere in Mumbai during the attacks, their funding and payment for their medical expense will be by the Tatas. And they established a calamity rehabilitation fund, which was then extended to natural and man-made calamities. So after that, whether it is a cloud burst in Kedarnath or the floods in Assam or Andhra Pradesh, this fund continues to contribute to the well-being of the afflicted in a very, very sustainable way. So responsibility is not necessarily by giving a one-time amount as a checkbook charity, as it is called, and be done with, but to engage with the community, engage with the best minds in your company, and then use the best of the ideas in order to benefit the beneficiaries in a sustainable way. I think the government, the bureaucracy and business can collaborate in a fantastic way to ensure that this is done, because these are 2 sides of the same coin, with the society as the primary beneficiary of every activity they undertake. The last part of the Tata values, here are some of the figures of the CSR spending of Tata companies, which has gone up year on year. And these are just 9 of the 100 Tata companies figures I got in the public domain. And this is the contribution of the Tata Trusts of the last 10 years. The last part is pioneering. We will be bold and agile, courageously taking on challenges using deep customer insights to develop innovative solutions. Very few people know that TCS was going to be shut down in 1978. Mr. Kohli, who was the head of TCS, told JRD Tata that India doesn't believe in computerization. Mrs. Gandhi had kind of nationalized the banks, and the nationalized banks were not interested in computerization. Very few know that TCS had put together the permanent account number idea, and there are a lot of newspapers has covered that story from my book. And after that, they had proposed to computerize the entire tax collection system of the government. But Finance Minister Charan Singh said, no, computerization will lead to unemployment. So the Finance Ministry will never get computerized in my time. If the Finance Ministry and several government procedures would have computerized 40 years ago, you know where India would have been. But these are the experiments we have undertaken, like Gandhiji writes my experiments with truth. I think the bureaucracy and the government can definitely write their experiments with truth on hindsight as to how several mistakes were blunders. And I'm glad we are correcting ourselves now so that we don't repeat those mistakes. The rest is history. TCS succeeded. Tata Steel was considered an inefficient operator in a sunset industry. In fact, there was this whole group of CEOs who came from Harvard Business School to Mumbai, and they spoke to several CEOs from India and told, and Mr. Ratan Tata was one of them, and Mr. Ratan Tata was making a presentation on the Tata group of companies. This was 92, 93, around the time India just got liberalized. And they said, after the presentation, they said, oh, you know, the era of business houses in India is over. There's going to be no scope for these kind of conglomerates, because in Indonesia, in Korea, Daewoo Group in Korea, the Salim Group in Indonesia, many of these soap to nuts conglomerates have not succeeded. So the days of Tatas and Birlas are over. You must focus on one or two business categories, and that's about it. The subsequent 25 years is a proof that we do not need to go by international wisdom alone. We have our own gut, our own experience, which tells us that no, we can turn around things. And I'll come to that as to why and how it happened. Titan, when the Tanishq jewelry business was underway, for 5 consecutive years, Tanishq was making losses. Csr Desai, who was the CEO of Tanishq, was very passionate about the jewelry business. Tata Sons was not very happy. McKinsey asked Titan, give us one reason why you should not shut down the jewelry business. You're making losses for 5 years. Csr Desai said, we feel there's a lot of potential in ensuring that the gold and jewelry business is done in a more systematized format, so that all the fleecing that happens with the women in terms of the quality of gold and all the underhand dealings which happen in the jewelry business can be legalized. Today, Tanishq contributes 86% of Titan's business. And Titan has risen to become the 3rd largest Tata company by market cap, with 85,000 crores as market cap. Pioneering. We need to think differently, believe in ourselves, recalibrate. They introduced what was called karat meter. Karat meter was a simple device where anybody could bring their family jewelry and find out whether it is genuinely 22 carat or less. And the story goes that most of the women got their jewelry to be tested, and they sat at the Titan storeroom, Tanishq storeroom, and wept, because they realized that the family jewelry which they thought was 22 carat was 16 carat, 17 carat, 18 carat, and their family jewelers had been fleecing them over generations, saying that, "Arey, ye to khara sona hai." That khara sona emerged as khota sona, and then they realized that a proper scientific way of doing things. Today everybody has a karat meter. Even your local jeweler will have a scientific way, and then we have this mark and all of that to say that this is 22%. But that happened when an established player enters an unorganized industry and turns it around. Pioneering businesses. I shared Tata Steel, I shared Tata Motors, I shared Titan. So what happened when Ratan Tata was told that this will not succeed? In the 25 years subsequently, India became, we know how India has grown. I shared India's GDP has grown. We've given up the Hindu rate of growth, which Professor Rajkrishna had ascribed to India, that India and Asian countries are Hindu and Buddhist majority countries, and these religions believe in karma and rebirth, so they are risk-averse, incapable people who can never be successful. And hence India and other Asian countries will grow only at 3%. In the year 2000, OECD, which is a Commonwealth group, did a study. From 1 AD to 1750 AD, and I'll conclude with this, with the India story. From 1 AD to 1750 AD, for 1750 years, there was one country which contributed 35% of global trade. Any guesses which was that country? India. For 1750 years, India was contributing 35% of global trade. From 1750 to 1850, 25% of global trade. And from 1850 to 1950, Britain's contribution to global trade increased from 5% to 25%. India's contribution to global trade reduced from 25% to 5%. And then the Western economists would come and tell us that the Hindu rate of growth will stay at 3%. When we were contributing to the global economy even before some of those countries came into existence. The same OECD predicts today that by 2050, the economic contribution in the world GDP will again tilt back to Asia. India and China will once again contribute to 50% of the global economy. And the 21st century, as it was predicted, will be the Asian century. Who will be the Asian leader, I think time will tell. But the kind of promise that India has, and as we have seen, we have 1/3 of America's geography and 4 times their population, 12x the complexities. We do not have a centralized communist government of the China model, but yet India has risen to become the 3rd largest economy in the world. Tatas have grown in these 25 years from 25,000 crores to 6,50,000 crores. And the story of India and Tatas is quite intertwined because they have been torchbearers of a system of business where you can do well by doing good. But they have also been trailblazers in the new world order where business excellence, innovation, customer centricity, people practices, sustainable development, and globalization are equally important. That is why I have named my book From Torchbearers to Trailblazers. That is also what I would ascribe to the India story. We have been torchbearers of an ancient civilization, but we are trailblazers in the modern global growth story. Thank you.